thank you to you all, and thanks to our panel. It is, as was just said, a great opportunity to discuss where Europe stands on its regulatory position on crypto, what we can learn from that, and perhaps look a bit at a very turbulent regulatory situation in crypto at the moment, particularly in the US. I'm going to start with the basics. The EU has a new crypto regulation. It's the first major jurisdiction in the world, by my reckoning, to have a tailored law that fits the crypto sector, the markets in crypto assets regulation. It's not quite yet finalized, but the remaining steps are a formality, so we do know what the regulatory situation will be for crypto asset providers starting as of next year. I'd just like to ask each of our panelists to kick us off. What does having MiCA, this landmark new law, mean for the situation of crypto companies within the EU? And I'm going to start with one of our European exchanges, Bitpanda, Christian.
Hi, nice to be here in Brussels, and thanks for the invitation. I hope you can hear me properly. So I think MiCA will be a game changer. We saw with FTX that some parts of the industry did not really have all the, I would say, best execution or best handling of customer funds in place. And so I think it's a very good way forward that we now put that in a regulation that is binding, that is applicable, that is harmonized, that is European-wide the same. I think one of the key challenges will be that we really then create a level playing field in the sense of that everybody falls within MiCA. This goes especially for now offshore companies, so that we really have them in Europe and really have them falling under the same rules, not like different levels applying. And secondly, I think legal certainty is something we see, especially with the US things you mentioned just now. We had this discussion some years ago. Might it be security? When might it be security? I'm very happy that we moved away from the MiFID discussion into a more dedicated, own setup regulation in the sense of MiCA, because otherwise I think we would have kept this legal uncertainty for the whole sector for years to come.
Okay, and we'll definitely return to a lot of those points you raised, because I think there's the big points we can expand on later in the panel. But I'm going to turn to Marijke. What's the post-MiCA world look like for you?
Well, I think this is on. I think, as with anything, that it's a balanced answer. It's an opportunity. Obviously, it could be our competitive advantage as a market. To have a very comprehensive regulatory framework, but it also poses challenges, of course. I mean, its practical success will depend largely on its implementation, so, time and the markets will tell how successful it will be. I think we also need to be careful that, the more regulation, the more risk of stifling innovation, and I think, in terms of if we want to compare ourselves to the US market, it's kind of obvious that we lag behind, or we lagged behind when it came to Web 2. So there's an opportunity for us in Web 3. We just need to make sure that we can grasp it and that we don't sort of disencourage startups from innovating in the space because of hefty regulatory challenges. So.
Laura, would you agree with that from Key Rock?
Yes, completely agree. I agree with Marijke and Christian. So it will bring legal certainty, of course, a lot of protection for consumers, which is great. It positions EU, on a worldwide scale. Position well the EU in comparison to what's happening for the moment in the US. From a sector point of view, it represents a lot of requirements to implement within a company. These requirements comes with costs, of course. So yes, there are some advantages. There are also some disadvantages to it. We'll come maybe a bit later on what MiCA brings and what could be improved.
Yeah. Ondrej, that must all sound quite familiar to you, this balance between kind of regulatory certainty and stifling innovation. Is that, what will you be looking out for as MiCA gets implemented?
Well, thanks for the question, and thanks for the invitation. I think it's very good to discuss MiCA, even though it's finalized and negotiated, but I keep saying actually this is not the end. This is just the beginning. And there was a very good exchange that at least personally I had throughout the negotiations of MiCA with a lot of representatives in the sector. I see many known faces actually here, familiar faces, and I'm really grateful for that. But I think with the entry into force of MiCA, I think we really need to keep up also this intense communication to make sure that whatever comes with MiCA on other levels of, let's say, technical legislatory framework, secondary, what we call the secondary legislation, the level 2 technical standards, etc., is also actually thoroughly scrutinized by the industry, and that we have the right feedback so that we can actually also influence the final outcome. Because critical, and I would only agree with what has been said earlier, MiCA is currently just law on the paper. It will be published in the upcoming days, but it's still on the paper. It has never been applied. And the critical for that is the successful application, the implementation of it. But it's not only, as you mentioned, the task, and it will be difficult, and I agree. It will be difficult, and I would love to see in MiCA more granularity when it comes to, for instance, small CASPs and significant CASPs. You know, having more divergent requirements put on small companies compared to large ones who can actually afford those costs of the compliance. But the critical would be the engagement of the sector, the preparedness of the sector, but also the preparedness from the side of public authorities. The supervisors, the regulators, they will have to actually learn and build their expertise as well. And I think there lies a huge challenge together with the industry. And that's why I always invite, you know, the sector actually to engage actively with all the supervisory authorities, be it on European or national level, to make sure that there's a good and clear understanding of the rules. Because, as I said, now it's on the paper. We have to really clearly understand what is meant by it, and then to translate it into practice. So that, in my view, would be the first challenge. And the second one, I agree. I think it brings more predictability, legal stability. I hope that we will not change MiCA every other year because of events in the sector. There's a lot of colleagues, you know, witnessing FTX collapse, you know, calling already for MiCA 2. I don't think we're there, right? But we have to make sure that this is also going on, and on top of it, I think what it really brings, and I think it was already mentioned, it should create trust from both the consumers but also in the industry, because the crypto sector is actually not isolated sector. It's actually interacting with other financial services providers, being banking industry, but all the others. And I think what MiCA, what the ambition of MiCA is actually to build this trust along the sector, between the industries, between the businesses, but also towards the consumers, the customers, the investors.
Yeah. You spoke a lot about intense communication between the industry and government lawmakers. You spoke about learning by regulators as they kind of move into this new sector. I wonder if the rest of the panel agrees with how that worked during the MiCA process. As a reporter, there were definitely a lot of hairy moments in the agreement of MiCA. There was a stage when the Parliament came close to banning Bitcoin because of the environmental outcome impact. You know, did you take a message from the way in which MiCA was agreed, and what do you think are the learning points you could agree for both how we implement MiCA in Europe and develop future crypto regulation for this innovative sector? Laura.
Yeah. So Kovarik is part of multiple working groups in Europe that assembles a lot of crypto players from exchanges to market makers like us or custodians. And during these discussions, we debate on MiCA, on the EU regulations, what are the obstacles, what are the benefits, and then we also have calls with MPs where we can voice our concerns and try to work hand in hand to try to find the best solution. Because at the end, a regulation must be adapted to the risk of an industry. Maybe one element that we don't have to forget is what happened with Bitcoin. And there was discussions at a time where they might ban proof of work from MiCA. which would have been a huge killer for the industry. And if I remember well, it was 4 votes. It was about 4 votes to be approved. That would have been a huge mistake. So we have to make sure that we continue to have these open discussions. And actually, Mika, it's a multi-year process. The first discussion started in 2018, and it's good. And level 2 is coming, but we have to be patient because the market is progressing very quickly. There's a lot of challenges, and we have to make sure that we understand everything to build a regulation that is adapted to the industry. So let's not be too quick, because there's a lot of regulation coming in with DORA and with the Data Act.
Yeah.
So yes, let's not kill also the industry and the innovation with regulation.
Yeah, you referred to the new rules on operational resilience and cybersecurity in financial firms, DORA. Marijke, go ahead.
Yeah, I think, I mean, with the Bitcoin thing, we certainly dodged that bullet, but I mean, I think there's still other bullets that might come. So I think, like Laura said, we don't have to, like, sit back and relax. I think it's important to keep the conversation going and to signal all the concerns and definitely also the opportunity, and to keep building trust as an industry towards regulators and supervisors. I think it's just critical to move this industry forward, and I think we all have a role to play there as industry players. So yeah, we're still a long ways away from being, relaxed and confident that it'll all work out.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, you already raised the spectre of MiCA 2. That is not something you're hurrying to have. But when this is a fast-moving sector, these MiCA rules were originally proposed in 2019, I think, which is a very long time ago in crypto world. When is the right time to review this, and what kind of new areas might you need to look at, do you think?
Well, you're right in the sense that obviously crypto sector is fast evolving one, but I think that would be the case also for other digital services in general. But I think, I mean, I don't see many ways how to accelerate the process on the EU side in terms of legislation. You were right. The first mentions of MiCA 2018, the Commission Action Plan on Digital Finance, and it will fully come into force in 2025. So it's actually basically 7 years, right? But I don't think the solution is actually come up with changes every time something happens. I'm really glad that we actually managed to find a political agreement before the FTX collapse. Because I would really see MiCA completely changed because of this, because there was a lot of political pressure. And you can all find it on the Parliament's website. We right after the collapse, we had the exchange of views in the Economic and Monetary Affairs Committee, and half of the colleagues were calling for MiCA 2 because of it. But there's different takeaway, and that's why I really feel that we need to implement it and apply the rules properly. The FTX had MiFID license in Cyprus. It was not enforced. So do we need to change MiFID rules for that? Well, we will eventually, right? But not because of FTX. And I think we should do the same with MiCA. The idea, and that would be my answer actually to how to actually regulate the fast evolving sector, is coming with something that is not too prescriptive, and that is actually not attached to some specific elements and specific phenomena in the market in the time of making. I mean, now you can argue that indeed MiCA is specific. It is, yeah, especially in the area of stablecoins. It is, in my view, we slightly overstretched that. But in general, I think it gives guidance. It gives some clarity. And I don't think the way forward would be to change the rules every time. But question of timing, it's already in MiCA. So in 2 years' time, there will be first possible for review, and that's specifically for decentralized finance or decentralized protocols. Because right now the Commission is actually analyzing that. We managed to carve it out, but obviously it's a matter of application, what the competent authorities will decide whether it's decentralized or not. But I think the Commission will analyze the sector, the area, and will come up at the end with some recommendations. Do we need to act regulatorily or not? I think that's actually one of the first moments where I would definitely invite the industry to engage closely with the Commission, because that may be critical in terms of the future development. And then the general review in 4 years' time. And that's something that is very, very naturally included in all EU regulation, that, you know, the Commission is coming back with a report on application and then saying, you know, do we need to change the existing law or not? And I think this is also a good opportunity, even for the industry, to basically gather the evidence from the very beginning of the application of MiCA and come up then to the Commission before the report is there to say, what is your day-to-day experience with the MiCA application in practice? Because I think the Commission would need to hear it. And then also we would need to hear it as co-legislators in case the Commission is proposing some changes or upgrade of the regulatory framework. Yeah. But I think, and that would be, I would definitely advocate it for this in the Parliament. Let's make sure that the rules are in place, are applied successfully, and only if there is a really big need and urgency to change them, then, you know, to adapt them accordingly. Because, and we come back to the point of legal stability and predictability. We cannot change rules every 2 years. That would not create any good for not even for the industry, but not even for the authorities, because they have to adjust as well accordingly.
So we've heard they'll be on the lookout for information from the industry about how well MiCA is working. Obviously, we don't know how that's going to play out yet because it's not in effect. But what kind of things do our industry panelists, what kind of areas of feedback will you be looking out for and providing to policymakers?
Maybe I can start, because I think there are some very important parts that you said and that I really want to highlight. First of all, we should keep the good balance we had in MiCA level 1, in level 2 and level 3. I see there an extreme danger that EBA and ESMA will overpush and just take what is in the MiFID world directly to the crypto world. And we have all this discussion we had in MiCA level 1, again on MiCA level 2, because they want to have, I don't know, CSTR de facto applying. They want to have, so there will be some of those things. We saw those in MiCA level 1. We fixed that, and I'm very happy that the industry was heard in this case. Same with Bitcoin. I think the second point I want to make is, if we want to have some kind of crypto environment in Europe, we should be very, very careful in touching the ground points, in the sense of we cannot ban Bitcoin. If you ban Bitcoin, crypto is dead. You can then de facto close it down, but we should not even discuss this. I know Parliament is different and they see it from a different perspective, but nevertheless, also from ESG reasons, also proof of work, we need to accept what the market has, and I think this is also what we will need to see with MiCA. The third point I want to mention is something around the topic that we see different players in the industry. We see many people trying to play by the rules. We see many people trying not to play by the rules. And we need to really clearly differentiate that, protect the consumers, but also making it right and getting it right. Currently, consumers are flocking to the wrong side of the market, mainly unregulated. We saw it with FTX. We see it with other providers. And I have the fear that we have then the MiCA world, the bubble where Europe is, but we still have this kind of reverse solicitation thing where they, from outside Europe, will come into that. So we will need to take extremely care that we protect the European market in the kind of sense that they need to apply the MiCA rules fully, and that we really have there a good enforcement of those actions. I think these are, at least for me and for us at Bitpanda, because maybe to our company, we always tried to did it right. Even 2014, when there was no regulation in place, we get in line with the regulator and ask them, hey, what are good practices to do? What should we apply? Then with AML5, we started very early in registering in, I think back then, 5 different countries. Now we have much more. We have MiFID license, all those things. So I think this needs to be coming more into the industry, the commitment to really do it and play by the rules.
Okay, so some concerns about how the EBA and ESMA, that's the EU authorities for banking and securities markets, will implement what Brussels speak we call level 2, but they're kind of implementing rules that will say exactly how will MiCA work and what kind of forms do you need to fill out and what kind of information do you need to provide. You do raise a very interesting point there about unfair competition and people offshoring and so on. That can happen from companies outside the EU. It can happen with companies inside the EU. And you've already sort of referred to, Ondrej, that there are definitely some concerns about national regulators within the EU in Cyprus and places that maybe they're not all as rigorous as their rivals. Are you worried about this kind of relationship between national regulators? Are they going to cooperate with each other? Are they going to compete with each other to attract business? Is there a worry that there'll be kind of undercutting of the rules between them? Laura.
Well, inside the EU, there's definitely today already some regulatory arbitrage, where there's some countries who have implemented a soft MiCA license that will give you access to MiCA, where some other countries have stricter rules. So clearly, there's some fear how, like Ondrej mentioned, regulators also need to keep up with the changes and have the expertise and develop that expertise internally. So there's a fear from the sector of which regulator will be able to provide that license and will have the good expertise. And then from outside, like Christian mentioned, will there be a Brussels effect? Yes, I think Brussels effect is okay. We're building the regulation in Europe, and then Europe is a market of 450 million people with good income. So it's very interesting for the rest of the world. And at the end, Europe is building regulation, but the rest of the world has to comply with Europe because they want to target the EU market. So I'll be curious to see how the regulators in the EU will deal with all these external firms who wants to target the EU country, and will it be the same rules for the same activity for the same firms? Let's see. Will there be advantages or disadvantages for entities based inside Europe or outside of Europe? I'm curious.
Yeah. One case I heard mentioned last week by an official from the Irish Central Bank was, what if a company goes to one regulator and says, here's our business idea, and they say, no, we don't like that, we don't think it works, and then they go to another country that accepts it, and then they get a license, and then they can operate against the EU. That sounds pretty sort of troubling situation to be in, where they can just pick and choose which regulator is going, or arguably it's good that you have regulators competing with each other in order to kind of deliver the most competitive and best environment for the industry. Which do you see this as a good thing or a bad thing? This kind of.
I'll jump in and then Marijke maybe.
Well, I think, as with everything, time will tell. I think we all need to sort of wait and see what all the regulators, how they will approach this this thing. I mean, it's not that you can go to one regulator one day and then tomorrow the other, right? It's sort of a practical nuisance to go through that whole process. So I don't think there's many people that will go through that. So it's a big question mark at this point. I think we're all kind of curious. I think, to Christian's point, I just think it's very important to keep showing up and showing that we do want to comply and to build that trust. I think I don't know how many users and consumers are actually concerned with the ethos of blockchain being privacy and monetary freedom. I think overall, I think most consumers don't mind going through the KYC process and doing all these things because it just shows you're in a mature industry. But it's nobody knows. Time will tell.
Yeah.
I just wanted to take an example because I'm not too worried about in a European or in a EU arbitrage. This is a point we discussed with CFDs and product intervention, and we are aware of that this is handled by ESMA authorities, NCAs. We have more and more coordinated colleagues that work together on. So I think this is not the big issue. What I think is a good example is we saw some providers offering a security similar product, and then it was stopped immediately. And then they offered cryptos for a longer time, actively targeting market, and nobody stopped them. So we saw with the MiFID world already somebody really taking up those issues and really addressing them, enforcing them within actually days. With the AML rules, this was not kept accordingly. And this is something I'm more afraid of, that we still, with the whole reverse solicitation opening and all those things, will have these issues that they say, no, we are just, you can register, you can find you on the web, and whatever it is, whatever company, I don't want to blame anybody here. I do understand their strategy. I just think that the regulator and the commission, as well as the whole industry, needs to ensure that we get it right now and we don't have an unfair level of competition by people not playing by the rules. This is what I'm much more afraid of than regulatory arbitrage within the European Union. Yeah. At least from my perspective.
Yeah, indeed. It's an international sector where you don't need a physical presence anywhere, and some companies rejoice in their lack of a physical headquarters. So it's hard to see how you'll keep people out of the EU market. I just want to sort of lance the boil. There's been big crypto news this week coming from the US, and the Securities and Exchange Commission has taken action within 2 days against Binance and Coinbase, the two of the biggest crypto exchanges in the world. And those companies have said these charges are baseless, that they are operating an unregulated securities exchange. They're going to fight them in the courts, and they complain that this is regulation by enforcement, that they're attempting to apply a very old, outdated securities law to a new sector of crypto. What does this mean for Europe? Is this going to be bad for the crypto sector in general, and therefore for the crypto sector in Europe? Is it going to mean Europe now can get ahead of the game in attracting crypto companies if the US has become a less attractive place to be? What's your immediate reaction to this news we've seen coming out of the US this week?
Personally, I was very disappointed by the SEC. Let's take the case of Coinbase, like they did an IPO not very long ago, where they had they published a lot of information, where the securities on which the securities that were listed were already listed at the time of the IPO. So no real surprise here for the regulators. So it's a bit disappointing that they, in 2 days, they enforce such a big complaint. Now back to Europe, I think MiCA is definitely the best approach. Better to regulate with clarity more than enforcement, and it could be an opportunity for all these firms. Like if we take now the roadmap of crypto firms, we can see that all the big players are based out of the US. So they had the time to develop, to become very big companies in a framework that was unclear from a regulatory point of view. Whereas in Europe, we prefer to regulate first, and then the market develops. So it's a different approach, actually. For the industry and the regulation. And at the end, maybe, yes, it's a big opportunity for EU and these firms, Coinbase and Binance. I'm sure now they're going to maybe stop targeting US customers and might be, tired of the lack of clarity, the miscommunication with regulators, and prefer to settle in a jurisdiction that is clear.
Ondrej, do you have a similar reaction that this was a big opportunity for the EU? Could this kind of thing we've seen in the US happen in Europe under once MiCA is in effect?
I don't think we could see the same development of events as in the US if we have MiCA rules in place, because obviously it's, again, about more clarity and stability in the sector. But I think this is a matter of approach. I mean, for me, it's actually it's not that much surprising. You know, that's the way the U.S. authorities are actually coming to the regulation by enforcement in the market. So basically, they let you do whatever you want until they won't, and then they stop you, right? We don't have this approach here. Obviously, we had cases like that before, also in Europe. But I think that's also the idea why there is an initiative to introduce a EU-wide regulatory framework for the sector. But I think, in general, yes, it can be an opportunity. I hear businesses saying that they may be considering shifting their activities because of the EU framework that will be enforced. But at the same time, and I think just coming back to the same point where I started, the key will be the good application. I heard from one of the jurisdictions in Asia, their considerations saying basically, look, we will be watching you in Europe when the MiCA is applied. If it's successful, we may be inspired and do the same thing in our country. If not, if it's a failure, we'll just do ourselves, our way. And I think that's the same thing. So at this point, and we also see, for instance, more interest from venture capital funds in investing in crypto in Europe because of the promises of the framework. But this is, what actually is giving a positive opening for the market until it's applied. And if it's not applied successfully, then the trend can actually very easily be overturned. And I think that's the critical part for us. We really need to make sure that in 12, 18 months, when MiCA is in full application, that we are actually ready for that, and we keep up to promises that we made when drafting the regulatory framework. Because otherwise, we may face not the similar problems in the US, but different level of problems, but we would face problems as well, and it would not create what we expect the stable regulatory framework for crypto to grow in Europe.
Yeah. Other reflections on that, on what's going on in the US right now?
No, I think I agree. I mean, it's kind of typical for the US to act this way. I think to me, it feels like a major step back for the industry over there. I just don't think it's wise. Just that the manner of how it's all been presented and how it's all being handled, it just feels like they're putting up a war against crypto, and that's just gonna make people angry, and it's not going to help in any way with forging these relationships that you need, I feel, between regulatory bodies and the industry to actually cooperate and find the best solution forward. And so I really don't understand why you would take that approach. I really don't. But I'm happy we're in Europe, and it just feels a little bit more mature here.
I mean, one other thing that strikes me is we've seen this sea of new regulations coming on the crypto sector. We've got a new tax rules ensuring you can't kind of squirrel away your crypto in an overseas jurisdiction without the tax authorities knowing about it. We have anti-money laundering rules. We have licensing rules under MiCA. Nothing is as boring as respectability. And do you think all of these rules combined will make crypto no longer exciting for your average investor to invest in? Are we risking kind of death by 1,000 cuts for the industry? Christian?
Yeah, I think this is something that might be on the longer roadmap. I think with MiCA we have actually a quite good balance. So we didn't push too hard on all those things we see, for example, with MiFID. Sometimes it's a little bit overburdening if you have a retail investor then confronted with, 200 pages prospectus, 6 pages from PRIPS kit to other documents and descriptions. So there's a lot going on in the sector, and it's good that MiCA took a little bit of a lighter approach there. On the other hand, and for all the praises we see for MiCA, I want to address one point that fits quite well to the issue we see in the US now. If you look at the asset reference token and on the definition of financial instruments, I don't think that this is aligned. To be open and to just present some critical points here too, we just don't want to sit here and praise Mika. Mika is a great thing, but there are still problems. For example, asset reference tokens, if you imagine gold, so an ounce of gold tracked by that was decided, I think, 3 years ago already by most authorities, that is a security. So I don't really know how this should then be applied in practice, because then you have a white paper, notified maybe even, and still the other one saying, no, in Austria or in Germany or wherever, this is a security. So we will have this situation we had in the US. This is why we pushed for some kind of binding opinion, or in the sense of escalation to ESMA. It was not really taken into that because there was no political compromise on that. But I still think this risk that we see and saw now more prominently with the US cases is still here. We should not forget that. So it's still, we have no harmonized, there's a huge paper on ESMA that we have no harmonized application of MiFID. We don't know European-wide what is a security and what is not. Insolvency laws, civil laws, this all plays into that. So that's not like presented as the golden thing yet. I'm fully with Ondrej. We need to really get this from a applicable point really harmonized. And I think this is, we all work in the industry and we all know that EU-wide harmonization, I would not say it's an idea. We have some steps in this regard, but still, if you look into cross-country or cross-border offerings, it's still a nightmare in some places. So we need to be really speeding up in this kind of sense.
Speeding up. Okay, I know we're coming to the end of our time, so I just want to close for each of you with telling me, I was going to ask what you want the world to look like, what you want the EU to look like in 5 years. I decided that was boring. So I'm going to ask you, what do you not want the EU to look like? What's your worst nightmare of in 5 years' time of what the regulatory situation in the EU has become in respect of crypto? And I'm going to start with you again, Christian.
Okay. So imagine a world where you would not only have banned Bitcoin within the European Union, but you would still have players outside of Europe that are allowed to offer Bitcoin. And then I think everything we did here was just for the trash can. So this, if you really imagine that situation, that you would still be able as a European customer by reverse solicitation to find an exchange that is not in Europe, this would drive everybody in the industry to offshore. This would be a nightmare in all dimensions. Even if you just apply the second point, even if no one is allowed to sell Bitcoin worldwide, this is a nightmare for the industry, and this will kill the industry. So please take the industry as it is, regulate them, help us to grow in this kind of sense. I know there are some steps to go, but please do not ban the industry and do not fight it like we see it in the US. Work together and really keep in mind what are the basic principles of the industry. We cannot stop decentralization. We cannot stop blockchain. We cannot stop programming, or like we had with Ether, all those discussions. We need those kind of things. These are elementary things of our environment, and otherwise Europe will not play any role in crypto or in blockchain.
Marijke.
Yeah, I agree. I think, I mean, these technologies are here to stay. They're not going to go away. So it's up to the regulatory bodies to make sure that, you know, this shouldn't be a political question. You know, these technologies are here, and we just need to make sure there's a framework in which they can operate and in which that consumers are protected. And we just need to get there as soon as possible. I think the worst nightmare would be that, you know, unclarity remains for several years to come. I mean, banning Bitcoin at least is clear, right? But if a lot of question marks remain, I mean, it's just going to be a matter of trying to, you know, have all these conversations with the regulatory bodies and having decisions be recalled or revoked because of unclarities and all these things. I mean, that's just so tiresome, and it stifles innovation, and it kills startups and all these things. So that would absolutely be detrimental to the industry.
Okay, Laura, what's your worst nightmare?
I share a bit the same nightmare. So regulation is a difficult balance between promoting innovation and protecting consumers. So the worst nightmare would be to be over-regulated, and the agenda of regulation in EU is already very packed for the next few years. So I want to make sure, the worst nightmare is that the industry would be over-regulated, that it would kill innovation, and therefore crypto industry players would just leave Europe.
Yeah. Ondrej, do you share those nightmares, and how are you going to attempt to ease them?
Well, I definitely I share them, and I mean, yeah, we were quite close to one of them in terms of the vote on ban on Bitcoin. But to be honest, I think it was this debate was so artificial. I mean, it didn't really have a point. I mean, you cannot ban a Bitcoin, or if you ban it on paper, there is no way you can enforce it. There's no way you can enforce it in Europe. So I think it was more a political choice for some colleagues actually to show that they want maybe a negotiation chip to in the end get the disclosure rules for, you know, that should be in white paper on sustainability matters. But I think there is no way of doing it. And we were in the same discussion on the transfer of funds regulation and the possible limitations on self-hosted wallets. Exactly the same issue. Again, not enforceable. I mean, if we want to do it properly in Europe. So I think I fully agree. I think the key point in my view would be I really don't want to see Europe banning technologies and banning some issues unless they are clearly illegal and harmful. But the scrutiny would really need to be tough in order to get there. But I don't want to see EU regulation banning. Because especially in the area of digital services and digital assets, I think are part of it. It's very hard to do it. You cannot create isolated island of Europe. I mean, we just had a Liberal Congress a couple of weeks ago where some colleagues were proposing that we create European-only internet. How do you want to do it? I mean, seriously, right?
And that's the Liberal Congress.
And that was the Liberal Congress, yeah. I was just like, I was reading through the resolution, I was like, am I in the wrong place? And this is exactly, I mean, the intention was, again, to protect, you know, from intervention from some of the superpowers. But I mean, there's no way to proceed like that, and I don't really see Europe going this way in any type of regulation, including the digital assets and crypto assets. But I think the second point that you raised, I really don't want to see actually also, you know, other types of regulation creating inconsistencies and double and triple regimes, and I'm slightly afraid that we are heading into it. I fully agree, and it's not only because I'm biased, I was working on it, but I think MiCA is actually a good piece of legislation in terms of the balance that we managed to strike. There's a lot to improve, I agree, and I have my concerns as well that I voiced publicly. But I think it at least sets some standard. We should not go beyond the standard in other types of legislation, and I see it on a day-to-day basis in the parliament. AML and counterterrorism financing framework first. The new definition of decentralized protocols. New definition of crypto assets operators in the taxation directive. Where does it come from? The same thing for Data Act, you know, artificial intelligence. I mean, we really need to make sure that whatever we do, and we do a lot, I agree, is actually fully consistent and coherent. Because I mean, we in parliamentarians, we will not comply with it, right? I will not bear the compliance cost. But I think this, I mean, I should not resign on the fact that there will be compliance issues for the industry, for the businesses, and that should be our primary concern. If we look at it from the perspective of the businessman or businesswoman, how should I comply with all this range of rules? Is MiCA the one that I should focus, or is something else the one that I should focus? You know, that should not be the question. It should be fully consistent. So if I get a MiCA license, it should be for me a guarantee that I can actually do my business in clarity and full understanding of the rules. We should not actually trying to push by backdoor issues that were actually left alone in MiCA negotiation. We should not push them by backdoor through other regulatory framework. That, I think, would create yet another level of inconsistencies, and again would actually create a huge risk in terms of successful application of the rules.
Okay, so unenforceable regulations, unclear regulations, inconsistent regulations, that is indeed the stuff of nightmares. I'd suggest to our audience you don't eat cheese just before going to bed tonight, otherwise you'll have some very exotic dreams. Thank you very much. We have now fully run out of time, so I'm just going to thank Christian, Marijke, Laura, and Ondrej, and thanks to you all for listening for what was an excellent discussion. My name is Jack Schicker from Coindesk. Thank you.
Thank you.